services, I will guarantee you your budget will be hurt just as bad. We have to balance all of it. We understand your concern. We know your concern. We are trying, but if we do not have the money, there's not a lot we can do, and that is what we are working on. But you coming in week after week after week, threatening us, isn't doing a lot of good. It's making us angry rather than how can we work with the sheriff?
I'm just telling the basic facts, okay? If you take it as a threat, that's your opinion. I'm telling you the basic facts. If I don't have enough people to run the jail, I'm going to have to do certain things that will keep the people in there safe. That's what it boils down to. The safety of my people is more important to me than anything else, okay? As it should be to you.
It is, and that's what we're trying to figure out, and that is why
my people stay safe. Okay, the liability issue that you're talking about for us, I didn't ask you to do that. I've had conversations with our county attorney. She assures me that this issue with liability, if one of my deputies commits a crime or violates the policy, then they lose their qualified immunity. Okay, well, what the county attorney said is really. It hasn't been a major factor, this qualified immunity issue. Now, a lot of the law enforcement people, they feel like it is a major factor for them, but if you commit a crime, you lose your qualified immunity anyway. So, according to Aaron, it's not that big of an issue. I didn't ask you to do this. You're doing this on your own.
Well, in my research, it is an issue because qualified immunity makes it to where people are less likely to file suit because they know you have that. But hey, it's brand new. This is an area we don't have experience on, and we will find out. You told us, I think last week, that one of your deputies was leaving because of the qualified immunity. So obviously, it is a problem because you lost a deputy because he doesn't want to take on that liability. Perception is, it is a problem, and until you can change perception overall, it's going to be a problem. The state legislature did it for a reason, and that was because they wanted people to be able to go after police officers because that was the mindset of that group down there.
And really and truly, as I've always stated, if a police officer commits a crime, they're fair game.
It's always been that way, or if it was gross negligence.
I've always been of that opinion.
And that's the way it was, but this removed the gross negligence side of it to where it's easier for someone to come after law enforcement, and that's where but given that aside, we have lots of issues at this county right now because of COVID. We understand yours. We know you need more people. We know you would like more money. But we have a lot of other things that this county has to do by law. And we will work with you. We will try to figure it out. But I personally am starting to get tired of the every week, if you don't do something, I'm going to do something drastic.
The way it's going to have to be. I'm sorry. I'm trying to run the jail as efficiently.
You come in here and you threaten us, because that was a threat the way you were talking. You don't sit down and say, hey, look, let's go through the numbers. Tom has been working with you a lot, trying to figure out how we can do all of this. We have county staff. Cindy tries to work on budget. She's trying to figure it out. Tom's trying to figure it out. And it's because we do not have the funds that we should have.
I appreciate the time. I am up here simply trying to get help from you on trying to get my jail to where I have enough people to run it.
And
it gets to the point, which is coming up very, very quickly in a matter of days, there are going to have to be drastic things done, and that's not a threat. It's simply being honest with you. And it's one of my things that I've always tried to be, and throughout my entire time as a sheriff and during the election, I am blunt with people. I tell you what is going on. I tell you the truth. And this is the truth, is that we've reached the stage with the jail that we are in drastic conditions, that we have to do something
to get some people in there. I disagree with you. You think that a $3,500 raise is not going to do anything. I think it will do something because there's nothing else that we can do to attract people here. There's nothing that you can do right now. Pay is the God Almighty dollar is what rules the world right now.
Yeah, and
If we get our people more of a pay raise, we have much more of a chance of getting applicants in to fill those empty positions in the jail.
And every survey I have ever seen on personnel has 2 or 3 things above pay as the reason people like to work there or people apply there. And that's what we try on. And you say our benefits aren't that great. Well, you know, I've checked with a lot of other counties. Our benefits are better than most counties. Our benefits are a lot better than private employers up here, with the exception of maybe 2. I mean, it's just, we have a very limited budget and we're stuck with that. You know, if the people of Park County would have voted for that 0.5% sales tax, we'd be in a lot better shape right now, but they didn't. So this is what we have.
Okay.
This is what we have to work with.
Okay. I'm not going to try and go back to all the figures and everything, but last week I presented to you $197,000. I presented to you the savings that we could have on this and that. We have the Marshall's contract has been raised up. You know, there's extra money there that would come in by the end of the year. So this offsets at 197,000. So it's not really 197. It's actually a lot less than that. You know, so you know we have been short of employees in our budget since the beginning of the year. We have not spent what was given to us for our budget. You know, so I mean, if you sit down and crunch all the numbers, $197,000 is not really that figure. It's a heck of a lot less than that in order to try and get some applicants into the jail.
Well, and you say you haven't spent your budget, and that is true, but you're at 48.1% or 48.7%, I think, at the end of June of your budget. There's not a big pot of money that you haven't spent. If you take a look at both the jail and the sheriff's department, you're running right at around 50% at the end of June, which is where you should be. You know, we are trying to work with it. You have to work through it with us. We understand your concern, but getting up here and threatening, because to me, that is a very threat. Now, sitting down with Tom and going through, hey, we have to do all this. This is the type of stuff. That is something you work through. But what you did is you just came up and made a public threat that you are going to stop things unless you get your way. That doesn't work, Tom. You need to sit.
Don't put words in my mouth and stop things when I get what I want. Okay, I'm not saying that. I came up here and I gave the facts of what is going on. And the facts of what's going on is I'm getting to the point in the jail that I have to start pulling people from patrol to fill the jail. And if I start pulling people off patrol, I don't have enough people to man a 24-hour department anymore. And I'm going to have to do something in order to protect the people out there working. And that's going to involve cutting back on the hours that we provide, like what the sheriff's office used to have. They were not a full-time 24-hour department. The way that things are going with the issues like what you said, law enforcement has become an extremely dangerous field to be in. It's gotten worse and worse every day. And I'm not going to put one deputy to work by himself out here for the whole county. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to staff the shifts to where there's going to be safety in the numbers, that they're not going to be working one person on a shift, that there's going to be enough people to cover each other. And that's what I'm going to do. And if that involves us cutting back the hours that we provide to the county, then that's just something that's going to happen. It's not a threat. It is simply a fact.
Well, I think you need to work with our county manager because he has other ideas on how you can start doing some of this based on what our previous sheriff did. I know nobody likes to go with what the previous sheriff did, but he had staffing that could do meet a lot of the needs of Park County based on the budget we have. We are a county that does not have a big budget. We don't. You know, we get less than $10 million in property taxes that we can spend on everything the county does, with the exception of road and bridge. That's the only part of the county that does not rely on property taxes. We get some PILT money in, but that does not cover it. This is where we are. This is the reality of Park County. And that's where you need to sit down and keep working with Tom and Cindy, because they're the ones that have got all the budget numbers, and they're the ones that can figure out what we as a county can afford. one of the things we're looking at is a COLA increase. Well, that's not your 3,700, but it's, part of it. And so we're starting to look at a lot of other issues. It's just that we have to manage the budget to keep the county afloat. We can't say, oh yeah, we can do that now, and then get into next year when, maybe revenue would even be worse because, the COVID thing was a big hit. But you're starting to look at now the second wave of layoffs and some other big issues. The county budget may be worse next year. And we would then have to say, hey, we can't maintain what we promised. So we're going to have to do a salary cut or other things or cut your department. And that's something I don't want to do. I want to try to come up with something that's relatively sustainable. And right now, we have got to figure it out. You need to talk to Cindy and you need to talk to Tom because they are our budget people. They're the ones that are going to sit there and say, this is what we have in the budget. And then they can come to the commissioners and say, this is what we have in the budget. We then can look at, is there anything else we can cut somewhere else? But they have to be able to tell us what's in the budget. They have started that. That's where they've looked at other things we can do.
I have to talk to
Right, and that's
with him a lot, and it's been going on for months now, and I keep losing people, and I'm getting more and more in jail, whereas now it's become a very dangerous situation. The people are getting burnt out, they're running out of overtime, and I cannot maintain this. I cannot maintain this.
and we're still, it's I wish I could snap my fingers and say we got the money for you. But until these two sit there and say, this is how we can do it, I can't. I mean, I really can't in good conscience say that, yes, we can do it until I am told that we have the funds available to do it.
It's been wrong for a couple of months now that I've been working with the county manager to try and get this resolved, and it's not getting there. It's simply worse in the jail, and we're at a point we have to do something.
And a couple of months ago, it was, we don't know the impact of COVID. We aren't too sure where we're going. If they would have promised it then, we would have been in a world of hurt, because now we're starting to understand the impact that we've had, and we're starting to see the reduced revenue. So that's what we have to look at. We can't do today. We have to look at the next year.
I would continue to work with the county manager, but I will, if I come back again next week, I will come back and I will be blunt again. And I will be honest with you all to tell you what's going on. I am not trying to get all kinds of money for all these special projects because I want to get everybody pay raise. I'm not trying to do that. I'm trying to survive with my department in a safe manner. That's what I'm trying to do. I'm very adamant about it, very passionate about it. I have a great concern for the people who work for me more than anybody else in the department because my people are in danger every day.
Yeah, I know.
Value my people, and I want to take care of them, and I have a hard time doing that right now with what I have. And I'm simply asking for your help. That's why I come here, to keep you advised of what's going on, and get your advice, get your help on how I can do things, and I'm not getting anything right now.
You have gotten conversations with Tom. He has given you suggestions. He is trying to work through it. The thing is, you have to show up with an open mind and say, right now, it is difficult in the county. We don't know where we are. We aren't sure about our revenue streams coming in because of COVID and the impacts and where unemployment's going to head and everything else. Because, there are a lot of unknowns out there that he is responsible to try to assess and figure out so we can take a look at what's going to happen next year. We can't promise you something this year that we can't continue on next year. And that is what we're looking at now. This is at the beginning of the budget cycle. Those are the type of issues that we're trying to address.
One thing I do come down here with, I come down here with an open mind. I come down here and I listen to the input from all three of you. And I do listen. I do try and take it. I do try and use it somehow. I ask you for your assistance. I ask you, how can I resolve this?
Well,
and I don't get much response back.
That's because Every time we say, well, have you tried this? You say, well, we're the professionals. We aren't going to do that. Our previous sheriff, as they say, had 210 inmates in there and they used 12 people. Well, no, I'm not talking, I don't want the 210 inmates, but if he could house 210 inmates with 12 people, that's the question that I have is now you're housing 38. Excuse me, Tom. Now you're housing 36 to 38 people and you want more than the 12 that could handle 210. And you say, well, you know, we're the experts. We know how to do this. Well, that's our suggestion. We look at the past. What has worked? How have they done it in the past? And can we work back towards that? You know, you keep saying you want 19 people in your jail. That's how many people we would have to give a raise to if you ended up with full staff. Well, that becomes a lot of money. And I look at it and say, we have 38 inmates. You want 19 people. They had 210 inmates with 12 people. Somewhere in between is a number that maybe both of us could look at and say, okay, 12 people isn't enough. 19 people is too many. How can we do a jail with maybe 14 people and do this or 11, you know, if we could adjust the number of positions down based on the fact that we have a lot fewer prisoners than we used to have. If you can adjust those numbers down and get them back a little closer to what we used to have, that's when you look at it and say, if I only have to budget for 15 detention officers rather than 19 detention officers, if I only have to budget for 15, then we can look at it and say, you know, there's room because I got all those others that I'm not going to pay. That's the type of discussion that we need to have. Yes, the ideal is 19. I'm not going to argue with it. That is the ideal. That is making everything just perfect. But we don't have the money to do that. Can we bring it down to 15, to 14, figure out a way we can do that? You know, there's ideas that, okay, you need to have someone on call to fill the gap. Well, maybe you need to look at if you are on call, you get a little extra money while you're on call, whether you go in or not. And then, of course, if you go in, you get time and a half. So you're giving someone a little extra money to be on call, and then you say part of your job is you're going to rotate it. You get it, you know, a week a month or a week every 6 weeks or something like that. There are all kinds of little ways you can do it. But the thing is, 19 detention officers for 38 prisoners when we had 12 for 210. That's where I'm having the problem. That's where we need to sit there and say, maybe, you know, how can we cut this down to where we don't have as many that we have to budget for? And then we can look at it and say, now we're at a point where, okay, additional pay would work. Those are the type of issues that we need to go through.
Okay, let me just give you a brief synopsis of why you could run a jail with 12 people with 200 people. Because you did it through violence and brutality. The Park County Sheriff's Office jail had a reputation amongst a lot of jails around here that all of their bad apples, you sent them to Park County because they would tune them up and they would make sure that they wouldn't cause a problem. The Park County Sheriff's Office got sued a lot for issues of brutality and violence. Knocking a person off of a stretcher cost us a couple million. Picking up an autistic kid because he didn't understand what he's supposed to do and slamming him down and back into the seat cost us $1 million. If that's what you want us to go back to, I will not have
that is 12 with.
Sir, I'm speaking right now.
Okay.
I'm
sorry. I apologize.
So I've been around a lot of jails in the past where they have been run by that nature, by being brutal and being violent. And in this society, especially nowadays, you cannot do that. It has to be a kinder and gentler detention facility. You cannot run it when somebody gives you a problem of slamming them up against the wall and threatening to kick their ass and put them in a holding cell. You cannot do that anymore. And that's what the Park County Sheriff's Office jail had a reputation of being back in the day. And that is not what we are nowadays. We are a professional run department, and we do our best to make sure that we do not get sued and cost the county millions of dollars. That is the kind of jail that we have now, a professional jail, not what it was years ago, where where you run it by making inmates scared of the guards. That's not what we're all about nowadays. But that is how jails used to be run all across the nation, was by brutality, and that's how they got away with doing it with less detention people. And you cannot do that nowadays. We had an expert come in here last year and explain to you how many people you had to have on a shift, and his opinion was that we were running not enough detention people on a shift. But we do run it with 3, and we are able to get by with it, but we have to have more people to cover, transport. We have to have people to cover when somebody is sick. But 3 is the absolute minimum, and that's just to do the jail. That's not counting the transport and having somebody for vacation.
And what I am saying is there is a point in the middle between 12 and 210 and 19 and 38. There's a point in the middle that we need to figure out how can we reach a little bit of a compromise and cut back off of that 19 so we don't have as big of a budget issue that we have to worry about. And at that point, when we can say, okay, 15 is a good number, we can figure it out. At night, when you don't have a lot of intake, you can have one person watching. That's what happened before. You have one person watching, one person on call. Those are the type of things that, Tom, you need to look at. You keep saying you have an open mind, but you have never changed off of, we have to have 19, period.
No,
it's not like, how can we adjust it?
I never changed off 3 per shift. The 19 is something, I mean, we ran the 19, but 19 is because of the marshal's hold. The extra body was for transporting the marshal's hold. You know, we've been doing 18, but if we continue with the 20 marshal's hold, they involve a lot of transport down to Denver, down to Pueblo, and that's why we wanted that extra body to kick up to 19. But the 12 is the 3 persons per shift. That's the absolute minimum. And the other, we got courthouse security is one of those 19, if you're saying that. That's one of those. You know, the commander is one of those. So we actually run the jail with 16 bodies. Okay. So, and that's, 12 per shift. And then we have people that run transport. And you have to have somebody when there's vacation or sick leave. You cannot do it with anything less than 3. I mean, you could say at night when they're all locked down, but what if you have 2 in a cell and they start fighting with each other? You're going to let them fight until we can get a patrol deputy to come in from Hartselle to come in and help them? Aaron will tell you that you can't do that. That's a liability right there. So the 3 bodies on a shift, there's no discussion about that. That is where I'm closed-minded. That's the end of that. But the 19, I mean, that's something we can talk about.
How many cells do you have?
I don't know how many cells we got. Probably got. I don't know how many cells we got. 50 or 60 cells. You guys
okay, but one of the things that you look at is well, we'll work on the maintenance side of it, but I mean, you look at it, you say, well, if 2 inmates are in the same cell and they fight, well, it sounds to me like at the 38 you're running, you can almost put 1 per cell. So at night they sleep in a cell, during the day they're out in the common area. So during the day, when they're out in the common area, you have more people there, to watch it. But then in the evening, when you don't have a lot of intake, and then that's something that, we want to go back through and figure out, okay, what is a good staffing? Because, from midnight, and now, of course, after 10 o'clock when the bars close, but anyway, from midnight till 5 or 6 in the morning, what type of intake do you have in your jail? Can you cut it down at that point? Can we shuffle around? I mean, these are all the type of things that we have to look at. And, and every time we bring it up as commissioners, because I know Mike's had comments and Ray's had comments about how do you do this? It's like, well, you guys don't know. Well, okay, yeah, we don't know, but we do know our budget. And that's the issue that we have got to figure out. We need to be able to sit down and say, what type of adjustments can we make right now? Where do we want to head in the future? And, maybe we look at it and say, well, the last tax didn't work, so maybe we do that again next year. Who knows? But it's something that we have to be able to look at. We have to have a budget that's sustainable. And we want to figure out, how can we do this? And every time we say, well, maybe we can do this, you say, oh, no, you can't do that. And yes, you had an expert in here that told us. Every expert I've ever dealt with has always given you, this is what I would love to have. And then you go with, okay, this is what you would love to have. What can we afford? And then you start getting into that. And then you look at it and say, okay, you're talking about, well, we'll get rid of the marshal holds and all of that. Well, now you're down to 12 people that we have in our jail. And you're telling me that you have to have 15 to 19, well, 18 people now, because when transport, you have to have 18 people watching 12 people. I got a feeling that, there are 16 people watching 12 people. So it's kind of like, okay, how can we adjust it then? To say that we just want a jail that is for Park County. We don't want a jail for everybody else. What can we do at that point? These are all the discussions that we need to have, but we need to have it where you are having the discussion, because in this forum, it's really difficult to sit down and have those good discussions. I mean, it's just, and that's where you have a county manager, you have an assistant county manager, we have a budget director. You need to sit down and work with them to figure this out, because it's really difficult to argue dollars and try to figure out costs when there's a whole lot of detail that goes behind it. And the BOCC work session does not really allow going through all of that detail behind it, especially with our new, the COVID thing, where we can't sit across a table and pass things back and forth. That's where you have to meet with the county manager. Then after you've done that, then the county manager can meet individually with each of the commissioners and say, what do you think and where are we going? So the commissioners then have a much better look at, this is the money, this is how we do it. And then we can have the meeting to where all of us are much more attuned to what our budget looks like. I mean, I got a really good idea about it and know where it is. I think Mike's probably got a pretty good idea. I think Ray's got a pretty good idea, but it's something that you have to work with them, because they're the ones that can sit there and say, okay, this is what we pay on insurance per, this is this. So then they can build the cost up for us. Because you want, $3,700? 3,500, which you then have to add probably 10%, 12% to, because we've got payroll taxes and additional retirement, the 401 and all of that. So you've got all of those things that go on top of that. So you're probably closer to around $4,000 that it would cost us. And, then you got to figure out, okay, how does that fit into the budget? We need to be able to sit down and look at it. We understand your concern. We really do. I mean, it's not that, as I say, I think every one of us would say, if we had the money, you'd have it. But we also have to look at everything else, and we don't have the money right now. So how can we work through this? What can we do? What type of, cuts can we make to say that, okay, we can offer this, but we aren't going to offer it to as many people? Because the other thing is, you offer it to the detention officers. Well, that gets them up pretty close to patrol. Does that mean you're going to be coming back and saying, hey, our patrol officers feel bad because now a detention officer makes as much as they do. They aren't as qualified. So now I need to give the same raise to my patrol deputies. I need to do all of that. Well, then it's become a whole lot more than what we originally thought of. And that's what we have to think through is, what is the impact on everybody else? What's the impact on the people here? I mean, they all understand the sheriffs and appreciate the sheriffs, but they also look at it and say, well, you gave them a good increase and we haven't had an increase for a year or two, so we want more money. It all falls into how do we handle the budget for the county? And that's what we've got to work through. We've got to work through it to the point where we can look at all of our employees and say, we think this is fair for everybody. We had to do something special for this group because of these problems, but we still can do something for everybody else. That's the type of thing we have to be able to work through. You have a treasurer's office that used to have 7 people in it and it's now down to 3.5. You have an assessor's office that's down 1 or 2. You have a clerk's office that's down a couple. You know, we may be able to have a little room somewhere. Our building department is down. Administration is down. I mean, everybody is down employees right now trying to figure out how we can keep the budget. And that it's like, you know, we have to work through all of that.
I understand, and Commissioner, I have been working with the county manager for the past 2 months. I mean, he acknowledges that. I have been going to him, and I have been asking and trying to get it resolved. But over the last 2 months, it's gotten to the point in the jail that we're losing people left and right. We have nobody come in there. And it's been suggested to come and talk to you all in the work session, just to explain the problem, to try and get the help from the commissioners, to try and get our people, get applicants into the jail. That's what I am trying to do. Me, myself, and Tom Meisman have been having numerous conversations. You know, I mean, so I come over, we sit down, and we go through all the figures. We do have these conversations that you're talking about for me to do. I have been doing that, but I'm just trying to tell you that we're getting to the point where I cannot run the jail anymore.
And we are now, I mean, we've been aware of that's been an issue for quite a while. Mike, you want to say something?
Well, I want to thank you, number one, for following through with the transportation jail kind of idea and getting those numbers from the county. It's not a new topic, you know, not having enough money for this department. I appreciate you being the voice for what's going on in your department, and you probably didn't understand what you were signing up for when you put your name on that ballot. But as the chair said, ultimately it does come down to budget, and I'm fairly confident that with some diligent work, as was suggested with our budget experts here, you know, both Tom and Cindy, you'll come up with some type of a plan, maybe be temporary, maybe be permanent. It's not going to be what you want. It's not going to be what Tom wants. But I encourage you to keep working through with this, and we'll come up with a solution. We had problems with the sheriff's department a number of years ago as our road patrol got down to, I think it was like 10 people, you know, and we were having state patrol having to offset that, and it causes a lot of problems. You're in a whole different mode now with the whole tone of, you know, this defund the police, and, you know, we don't like the police idea. I can't even imagine getting put into that position, but I encourage you to keep working through with Tom and Cindy, and we'll eventually come up with something that is sustainable. As the chair mentions, ultimately it always comes down to money. And I want to thank you for at least looking at one alternative. I'm sure you've looked at a few, but reaching out to the jail. I've always thought that, you know, the transportation jail model would solve these problems, but I was cautiously optimistic on that. It always seems that the cost for emergency services is so much more than I would anticipate, just from the nature of what you do. And we'll get it. We'll get it resolved. Maybe not to the point that, you know, that you're suggesting, but at some reasonable level where the safety of your officers is not in jeopardy. We can't have that. We can't have risks, you know, with personnel, and ultimately as we reduce we also have to, you know, understand that the biggest liability in any of our county has always been and will always been the first person that walks into that jail, and the second highest liability is the second person that walks into that jail. You mentioned that with lawsuits and all that. It's enlightening to see how much rights that a incarcerated person, you know, has, and the creativeness they have to sue. So It's not a good situation. I hear you multiple times, and I encourage you to look again, work with Cindy and Tom again, and find some moderate way, at least a temporary way that won't be overly impactful to the budget, because as Commissioner Elsner had continued to state that ultimately the commissioners are responsible for this. We can't put ourselves in a place where we're spending more money than we take in. I feel for you. I hear your pain, and there's gonna be a solution to this. We came up against this during the previous sheriff's term a couple of times, and he may not have got exactly what he wanted, but we got it to the point where at least the safety of the officers and the inmates were reduced. I don't have an answer for you, but I want to thank you for at least looking into the transportation thing. And I think those kind of ideas, looking at alternate solutions than what either one of you proposes, both Tom and Tom Eisenman and Tom the sheriff. There's got to be a midpoint somewhere. Maybe it's a temporary, but it's got to work for everybody. But everybody's not going to be happy.
Rick, where have the last 4 people gone?
One went to work for a private security company making more money. Terminated one. That's right. Mike Rostock, yep. I think 3 out of the last 4 have been because of pay, and then there's one signed instead of being terminated.
It's like I said last week, I can go to Sinclair and get $16 an hour. If I can go work in the jail for $18 an hour. You want to work overnight? You want to work holidays? You want to work every freaking weekend? Most people don't, especially if you're working there. The solution is, I'll just look at the and hope somebody wants to do it.
That's not quite our solution. Having been into a lot of jails as a contractor, installing phone systems and commissary systems so they could track what prisoners were buying, because you always have to keep track of the baby Ruths, because it becomes money inside, and watching it, and the issues you have are not Park County issues. I mean, they're everywhere. The worst place I was ever in was the Southern Mississippi Correctional Facility in Leedsburg, and it was, the morale, everything. It was not a fun place to try to help them set up their phone system. Best place was Bellingham, Washington, which is a type of jail I wish Park County would have gone to 25 years ago, which is a jail that handles locals. And then occasionally, of course, they'd have the things that all of the loggers from Canada had come down after they got paid, and they'd have to make special arrangements. So, it's, how do you handle it? How do you manage the thing? And a couple of things, I've noticed people in Park County that, went in and started working at the jail, and after a couple of years came out rather jaded because of the people you do have to deal with. You aren't dealing with the best people in the world, and the same thing happens to district attorneys. Who do they deal with all the time? Well, they're dealing with criminals, and it changes their outlook on life, and it is extremely difficult. And I really understand how hard it is. I mean, I kind of think about it, how could I be a jailer? And I look at it and say, there's no way in hell I could be a jailer. That's not something that I could handle. And I know how difficult it is for you guys. And it's a case of, how do we figure this out? within the constraints of Park County. I've said a couple of times, ultimately, and this is a few years off, ultimately, I would like to turn Park County into a county jail. And that is Park County. And if Summit County has a couple that they need to overflow, or if Lake County gets into an issue, work with the counties around us to where, hey, we can take a couple of years this time, and hey, we're a little full, can you take a couple of ours? That is ultimately what I would like to be able to say Park County has. It's a county jail that looks after Park County. Unfortunately, 20 years ago, that decision was taken out of our hands right now, and we have what we have. And how do we figure it out? That's where you look at, well, do we build a new jail? Well, you can build a new jail and you can make it a lot easier to be safe. And that's kind of, that is the direction I would like to see us head to. But what worries me the most is we get ourselves in a position where we can't ever get there. It's the old, I have to take out another mortgage because I can't afford the mortgage, and it's how do you get into the position where we can say, this is where we're moving. And that's part of, my biggest concern is how do we get to a point where Park County worries about Park County, and we take care of our own, we take care of our prisoners with the ability to help out occasionally if another county needs some, or have other counties work with us. So it's, we had a bad weekend, can we bring somebody over? That's kind of where I would like to head, and it's just how do we get there, and how do we, how can we do that? If we had a better jail right now, we could probably do it and get it down to where you would have fewer employees, because you could have a better way to manage the prisoners. But how do we do that with our facility? How do we maintain our facility? None of the answers are easy, and that's something that we're going to have to figure out going forward. All I can say is, we'll sit down. I'll sit down with Tom and Cindy, this afternoon, and just go through it again and try to figure out, maybe there's a way we can give you a better answer, or maybe I'll just tell Tom he's got to be the bad guy and say, this is where we are. But we'll keep working on it. We understand. I mean, I really do understand. The jobs you guys have. I really appreciate the fact that you're keeping those jobs. I mean, because right now, it's not a friendly world.
No, it's not. And I agree with everything that you just said, because you and Commander Fiddler are on the same sheet of music. You do not want to run a jail for profit. You want to take care of the local inmates. I mean, we all agree with that. But in this time, it's nice to make that extra $600,000 right now. The only thing I disagree with what you said is that Park County is not, I mean, nothing strange about Park County going through this. And I disagree with that because you provided paperwork to me saying Park County is one of the most expensive counties per person to live in. And if I look at every deputy, detention deputy and road deputy that works for Park County Sheriff's Office, I think probably 70% of them live outside the county. So my deputies, the ones that come up here and want to come to work, they can't find a place to live.
And that's something, we're trying to work on there. We've got some other thoughts, and, Tom has brought it up, and whether, we have some type of dormitory housing, because you can get, like mobile homes that are set up for multiple, and work with the park over here to see if something like that is, if you live in Denver and you've got 4 shifts up here, you drive up, you can stay here and then drive back, and you have your time down in Denver. We're still looking at a lot of that. The Habitat for Humanity, I was hoping would move faster, but the problem with that is it is a purchase. And what I'm trying to figure out is how can we do some type of housing for employees. And, the Habitat one is very specific that it's county employees or school districts, the people that can't get paid enough to live up here, to be able to provide some housing. The issue is, of course, yeah, we're doing that, Tom, and we're going to get there probably in 2 years, which doesn't help your situation now.
About this last year. I mean, it is a great plan. It needs to be done, but it's all about that great dollar.
Yeah, and that's, with if COVID hadn't have hit, we might have been able to to track down more money, but with the state having to cut back so much on their budget, you know, and it's become a real challenge. And I think we all know that housing is probably the biggest issue. You know, if you have a detention officer, or a deputy that wants to live in Fairplay and can rent a place for $500 a month, that's where we're trying to head, is that they could live in Fairplay, they can rent it. That is enough to be able to cover the costs of it. You know, the model works. It's just trying to build it to where we get that way, because then they can live here, they can afford to live here, they can enjoy living here. And then if they really like it, you know, keep moving up as the longer they're here, they make more money. You know, maybe there's two of them, their spouse can work and they both have jobs here. And then they can start looking at, well, maybe we want to move somewhere, you know, go somewhere else in Park County and build, which is an option. But it's that first, how do you get people a place to live that they can afford so they can work for the county? And, you know, my biggest concerns are the teachers and the sheriff's office. I mean, those are the biggest issues that I have, is trying to figure out how do we find housing for them. And that's what we're trying to work through. And the Habitat one, hey, that's great. However, you have to buy it. And, you know, it's like, well, do I want to, yeah, I'm getting a great rate. It's inexpensive to buy, but do I want to make that commitment right now? Or would I rather be able to rent a place and then figure out where it is that I want to live? All issues that we're trying to work on. Unfortunately, again, it takes time.
But the biggest thing I would ask, seeing how this whole thing is going today, is please let's try and do something the next couple of days. I mean, I will meet with county manager, but we have to come up with a solution. It can't be next month. I mean, we're talking about, it's got to be very, very soon in the next few days, because we're at that point where we're not going to be able to maintain the jail the way it is right now if we can't do something. That's why I'm asking, at least right now, out of everything come out of this meeting today, I've got to move on in the next couple of days. I've got to come up with something that's going to solve my issue to get people into the jail to work. And if I lose some more people in the jail, well, I'm probably going to come back down here and rant and rave some more. You don't have to put up with me, but you know what you got in front of you. I'm very blunt and I'm passionate, and I am going to do everything I can to keep my people safe. And that's what it boils down to, and I'm going to do it. So put up with me, because that's what you got.
Oh, we'll put up with you. There's something about a southern drawl that makes your ranting not quite as bad.
I'll try. But I will, after this meeting, I will get with the county manager and try and set up a date to, let's see if we come up with some resolution to work this thing out. But it has to be soon, please. County manager? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for